Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Angel Kleiman, and I'm the director of the Rosemary, Duffy, Larson Gallery here on Central Campus of Broward College. Tonight, we're joined by artist Sarah Nguyen as she shares her insights behind her solo exhibition, Diaphanous Bodies, which opened today in the gallery. The exhibition runs through January 12th, so I hope you all come and check it out. We're open Monday through Saturday. On all days, classes are running here at the college, so not during winter break and Thanksgiving break, but otherwise it will be open. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook to see images as well, but if you are local, there is really nothing like seeing it in person. It's a really beautiful exhibition. So without any further ado, I give the floor to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen, so everyone bear with me just for a minute while I do this. Let's just see. Of course, have to wait. Okay, let me adjust this. There we go. So thank you, Angel. Thank you for that introduction and for your amazing work installing this exhibit. I've only been able to see it via photos, but the photos are wonderful, and I hope that everyone who is able to get into the gallery to see the work, please do. I think that the show looks amazing in part to Angel and her crew that really did a fabulous job, so I'm eternally grateful. Thank you all for being here. It is, I know it's via Zoom and it's different from an in-person artist talk, but I really appreciate you spending this time with me. And so I'm hopefully not going to take too much of your time. I'm going to show you some slides and talk a little bit about this work that, that is in the gallery, but also what has inspired that work. So the work that you're going to see in the next couple of slides, or all the slides, have been created from the last 5 years or so. There are multiple mediums that I'm going to be showing you and multiple styles, but I consider myself a multimedia artist, so that is to be expected. One thing to know is that my work is based in storytelling and narrative, but interwoven with each piece is the personal and the political and historical concepts which flood my life. I'm often asked why I became an artist and what is the purpose of my art and what do I want my art to do, and I really do hope to answer these questions throughout the slideshow, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the slideshow. So please put your questions in the chat or ask away at the end. I also want to state everything that you see has been made by hand. So I'm often asked that question too. Do I make my work by hand? And yes, I cut every little piece, and of course all the paintings that you're going to see I've done by hand, and the sculpture as well. So when we look at art, and when I look at art, historical art and contemporary art, I'm not just trying to ask what is the artist trying to do, but what is the artwork about? And a work of art can hold many meanings and inspire multiple interpretations. With my work, I'm less interested in directing your conclusions as I am in revealing them. The desired effect is investigation. So in my paintings, I use a balance of abstract and representational forms. You do see this in the cutouts, which you'll see later on. And I do this to sever the connection between shape and meaning, connecting you, hopefully, connecting you as the viewer to the mark of the brush so that you become complicit in the art. Folklore, reverence, refinement of nature, observation of daily life are the general concepts behind my work. Stories and myths of a culture convey a sense of place and a sense of the people who inhabit that place. So in this way, when visual art interacts with a story, it enters a narrative sphere where it must encounter the local. I understand the world through visual art. And I use it as a way to reflect and interpret the world around me. Visual art is my language. My different styles of art and focus on different mediums have been inspired by my travels and artist residencies in the last couple of years. So I'm going to go through some so that way you can understand the concepts that are now shown in the gallery that you see. In 2016, I had an artist residency in France where I was able to study some of the cave art from the Cave of Lascaux. Delving deeper into the study of these original artists, the cave painters, and to take inspiration from them was a liberating step for me. I was seized with this idea that art as like an ongoing conversation with posterity in which artifacts of the past are painted over, yet the original art remains. And using the cave dweller as a metaphor for the fundamental human condition, we're forever shrouded in darkness and uncertainty, and yet we are determined to leave our own visions, our own marks upon the wall of the cave. And so when it comes to the most ancient human expressions of culture, the depth of their need as part of a ritual, it is evident in the spontaneous impulse to create these divine forms of animal and human life. And by returning to cave painting as the source of my artistic inspiration and creating a body of work that would capture the vividness and the primal forms of cave painting, but using modern mediums and techniques, I meant to, and I mean to, return the viewer temporarily to a state of this primitive shadow watcher, dwelling in the senses, experiencing the primacy of the physical. Pablo Picasso, after seeing the Cave of Lascaux for the first time, it is said, that he said, "We have learned nothing in 12,000 years." And while it is tempting to shrug this off as an idle statement, after studying the cave paintings of Lascaux, I would accept his claim in dead earnest. In 2015, I had an artist residency in Japan, and I was there to study the stories and folklore of the Shinto religion. And the Shinto religion encourages the proliferation of stories. This religion, from which all true Japanese mythology springs, accepts that every natural thing, be it a human, a volcano, a fox, a plum tree, has a kami or spirit. My work involves studying these various Japanese folklore and relating it to everyday scenes, which I witnessed during my travels in Japan. Kami has also been translated not only as spirit and soul and deity, but another possible translation of the word is beings placed higher. So in nature, in other words, is inhabited by kami. This word kami is the same pronunciation, but it's a different character for the word paper. And so I think there is a philosophical argument that could be made as to why traditional Japanese work has been made on paper. And I love the idea that working on paper was imbued with the spirit of kami as something placed higher. So I delved into this idea head on. I wanted to do everything on paper first as a way to just place my medium and support the concepts and mediums, and then second as the primary focus of my making. And so I decided to start doing very long paper scrolls, which of course were inspired by the scroll work that I studied in Japan. And I also started to cut out these forms, these abstract and somewhat realistic forms and allowing shadows to complete the narrative of these forms. Gao St. Zhao, the author of Soul Mountain, wrote that folklore is a mixture of history and legend and personal experience. And as I continue to explore Japanese folklore as the main source of my inspiration for these pieces that you're going to see, I also started to imbue them with personal experience, dealing with different encounters that I had in Japan, but also relating them to Japanese folklore. So for instance, this piece, Moon Rabbits, as an aside, Western ideas about, when we look up in the moon, there is a man in the moon. But in Japan, the folklore is there is a rabbit in the moon, and he has a mortar and pestle and is grinding up rice to make sake. So I started to explore the idea of painting and combining these cutout paper scrolls to add a dimension and a sculptural element to this overall work. And I started to marry these concepts of what I thought of as shadow drawing, which were initially on these paper scrolls, the cutouts, to my time in France using those shadows to sort of center on the main feature of my work. In 2014, my husband published a book of collected short stories called The Pages from the Textbook of Alternate History. And in 2016, he was contacted by a curator from the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle about commissioning an art piece based on his story, The Pages from the Textbook of Alternate History, Einstein Saves Hiroshima. The curator wanted to see the story come to life in a visual piece. And so my husband and I have collaborated before, where I've done illustrations for his book covers. There is an illustration that I did for the textbook, the pages from the Textbook of Alternate History, and I've done like interior illustrations, but this was the first install piece that we collaborated on. And so you can see here is the initial drawing that I did for the piece, just to try to get a sense of what they were looking for. And just so you understand the story and what's behind it is that these stories are that it's an alternate history. They ask, what if? So in this particular story, it's asking, what if Einstein refuses to sign the letter that galvanizes support for the Manhattan Project? And what if the project proceeds unfunded? And what would have been a nuclear weapon, the bomb Little Boy, is a dud. And that instead of detonating over the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, passes through a cherry tree grove, lands with a thud, rolling and settling, and then over the years, gathering moss and lichen. And so the piece here is what you can see is the first piece that was installed. This is a painted sculpture piece of Little Boy, and the cut paper surrounds it and has cherry blossoms falling down. This is an art piece about imagining peace and avoiding acts of war through creativity. And I hope this piece causes us to re-examine the past and ask what if, which sort of functions to sort of illustrate his story. I had the white scrolls surrounding the piece to basically show the actual history. History is written on paper. And white in our culture and many cultures symbolize death. And so those white scrolls around the piece are a reminder of what actually took place. One thing that I found during my travels in Japan is that in Hiroshima, there are white trees that have been left, and they're like bare skeleton trees that have been left and are still up from that time when the nuclear bomb did explode. So they represent that. And then, of course, the what if is the sculpture itself. Another aspect of this piece is these small cherry blossoms. The pink is the future, asking, hopefully, that we can change, we can learn from the past. And so what we had done, this piece is shown throughout from its time of creation. It's shown throughout the United States. And I've asked people to write their wishes for the future. Of course, this was pre-COVID, so their wishes for the future really didn't involve the future that we find ourselves in now. In 2018 and 2019, I started an artist residency at Orr Street Studios, where I worked on a body of work comprised of paintings done on paper. So these are oil paintings done on paper that takes oil paint, collages. So you can see behind me, there's all this painting work on paper that I'm ripping up and making into collage pieces. And there's a lot of pastels and a lot of pigments on here. And I also then included paper scrolls. And these pieces celebrate women authors and their books. So this series is about books that shape my outlook as an adult. And it's tribute to these women and their work. So I will just sort of go through it very quickly. The pieces themselves, the paintings behind them have aspects of these books. Again, I'm dealing with natural flora or fauna imagery here. And then there is a cut paper piece on top of it to create somewhat of a three-dimensional aspect to it, but also a veil of the book. So this book that I was looking at and inspired this piece is, well, it's actually a poem by the poet Sylvia Plath called Tulips. And this piece here was inspired by Beloved by American writer Toni Morrison. This piece here was inspired by the book Orlando by Virginia Woolf. This piece was inspired by Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This piece was inspired by the novel The Color Purple by Alice Walker, also an excellent movie too. And I mean, there's a lot of excellent movies here too that come from the books. This piece, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And this is inspired by a short story by Flannery O'Connor, Everything That Rises Must Converge. And I'm just showing you basically install work so you can get a sense of how big these pieces are. The back pieces are much heavier than the front pieces because they are collage pieces and oil paints on paper itself. But once I started with the medium of paper, there was really no turning back for me. And I really haven't been able to go back, and I do everything on paper at this point. So after creating Break Into Blossoms, I started to create quote unquote smaller piece paper panels. And these pieces were a mixture of looking at local and international folklore, as well as family folklore and family portraits. These are all blade cuts. I cut with an X-Acto knife using many, many blades. And these intricate compositions that you see here are mostly landscape-based and feature symbolic motifs, flora, fauna, an ever-changing moon, to like childhood memories of myths and fables and folklore. The large sheets, and this is mostly what you will see in the gallery, are hung from the ceiling and away from the wall so that the light directed at these pieces cast strong shadows behind them. And again, this is a nod to the flickering firelit rituals of our paleo ancestors. I see fiber cutting, and essentially this is what it's called, is somewhat of a fiber cutting, a paper cutting, as a means of making drawings three-dimensional. And I hope that these lacy, as they're often described, panels entice you with their complexity and content and sort of bring you in so you can capture those little soft details of, oh, there's a bee there. Or, oh, I see, you know, that there's a honeycomb or a different kind of leaf or something of that sort. You know, I really would like my art to refresh your vision and help you see the world in new ways. habit dulls our senses, and what we see every day we no longer marvel at because it has become familiar. So I do see art in general as a way that we can see the world through someone else's eyes and sort of recover that intensity of looking for the first time. As I mentioned before, many of these I consider family portraits, and many of them have the name of the person that they are made up after, or the meaning of their name. Many of the symbols are very personal to me, but again, I'm using these natural forms, these symbols of nature, because nature is a universal language. It's something we can all understand to an extent. So even if it means something directly to me, or I'm looking at a particular folklore for it, it may still you can grasp something of the intensity of the piece, or really, the chaoticness of the piece, of where it was coming from. And again, most of these pieces are located in the gallery. So I do hope that you get to see them in person, because it is very hard to see how large they are, despite the fact that I put on, specs here that they're 85 inches high. It is important to see that, oh yes, they are 7 feet, or 8 feet. And so you can walk around them and hopefully see the shadows that are shown. In 2020, it doesn't seem that far away, and yet it seems far away. I started a series in which the work that I was doing was inspired by the myths and folklore again, but of this time of the women of the Old Testament. I looked at these stories of these women as stories, and I did not approach this work from a place of faith. And you have 3 of these pieces showing in the gallery, which I'm really happy that they are there. This piece here, Lilith, just to give you a little background, there are multiple origin stories for Lilith, but the most popular is that she was the first wife of Adam. Lilith believed that she and Adam were created equal, both from dust of the earth. So she was not taken from Adam's rib like Eve was. And because of that, and she didn't want to do what Adam said, she left the Garden of Eden in order to gain her independence. This is one, the title obviously is Eve. And instead of an apple tree, I did create a pomegranate tree that also taps into the idea of creation myths from other cultures. This piece here is an accompanied piece to the first Eve piece here. And this one, Eve, written in Hebrew, also means to breathe. So this piece was quite my COVID piece. If you look closely, you can see imagery of the cellular or the virus of COVID coming through. But in Hebrew, the word Eve is written over and over and over again in the paper. This work was completed during my time spent in a residency, which I need to credit, the Isolation Digital Residency by Mirrors Magazine in the spring of 2020. This piece here has 4 scrolls. The 3 white scrolls represent a veil, and I will show you in a minute, and is placed in front of this large background scroll. And again, these are very large pieces. This is a story about the Old Testament story of Rebecca and Isaac. Rebecca covered herself with a veil so that her husband could not see what his bride looked like. And of course, throughout this time, face coverings and veils and masks, not only today, but for history, have had a long history and are often controversial. And so this piece is about Rebecca's need to veil herself as an act of love and humility and faith. And it talks about Isaac's acceptance of this. This work was also completed during another residency that I had. It was World of Co-Residency located in Sofia, Bulgaria in 2020. This piece here reflects on the subjugation of these two sisters. And if anyone is familiar with these stories, then you get a sense of it. And is a commentary for the present situation of women. And again, was completed during the World of Co-residency. And this piece is inspired not only by Ruth from the Old Testament, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it talks about how both of these women challenged the patriarchy while trapped within it. This piece in its design really does talk about Ruth's, I forget what they're called, but the colors that she did wear. Miriam is another piece, and again, 2020. Miriam was also known as a prophet, and she is the sister of Moses. And unlike most women in the Bible, she is never called a wife or a mother, and she has neither a husband or children. This imagery here is particular because she is of the sea, and crocodiles, which are alligators, in Florida, you know best, are very protective of their young and family. Miriam was also the only person who could find water in the Old Testament. So it was something of that sort, those images that were coming through. This piece is in the gallery, and it is a tribute to Deborah or Devorah, who was a judge in the Old Testament. The piece, if you see it in the gallery, you can see it better than in this slide, has two orange-yellow panels and then one purple panel, which represents the balance of justice. There's imagery of bees and palm trees where Deborah supposedly held court. And then this piece is also in the gallery, and I hope you're able to walk through it and walk around it and sort of really get a sense of the piece in its entirety. This addresses a number of issues around the meaning of home, which of course we've all had to deal with during this time. When I made this piece, I was thinking about the United States policy of rejecting refugees, and this is early 2020. For most of Jewish history, the Jewish people were refugees, and home was a tribe and a family, and the search for home and land became paramount. The huppah is a symbol of the home for newlyweds, and you get married under this symbol. It's also a reference to the tents that were Sarah and Abraham's home in the Old Testament. The idea of home took on another meaning again, and my thoughts turned to those who are without a home to shelter in, especially during that time when we all had to stay home for those couple of weeks and shelter in place. If that was the only way to keep our community safe and to keep our families safe, how could you do that when you didn't have a home to shelter in? So I'm getting into new work here. This work I started 2021. It is part of a series titled Honoring the Mother that I started in 2021 basically. And this work examines the environment and our relationship to the natural world. As I mentioned before, nature is a universal language and one that all cultures understand. And so in that way, its symbols can be used to bring you to a common good, or a common ground, rather, hopefully a common good too. The nature of plants and their beauty and fragility and their strength is captivating to all. The language of plants is a shared language and allows hopefully the viewer to go beyond your own personal experience and into the experience of this collective. The pieces that you see here actually really talk about particular algae that I started to investigate. This algae will both probably outlive all of us, may actually kill us or save us with global warming, but I feel like it's something that has its own language and its own communities. And so I look to sort of transcend the concepts of beauty here and envelop you in a space of color and texture. These pieces are three-dimensional, and they are a painting piece on plastic that has been cut out. So you can see in the middle panel, that is right here, is behind this. and this is the front of the piece. And then it is that cut paper piece that has the shadows. There's multiple scrolls, so it's very much a sculptural piece that you need to walk around. And this work has been inspired by my artist in residency with a Canadian group, and also with the North Louisiana Virtual Residency and the Rosslyn Charitable Foundation. I just want to sort of conclude and wrap up. Stories are one way that we use to create a sense of community, and artists in general have often turned to stories for subject matter, especially stories whose roots reach deep into their culture's collective memory. And these stories are why I create for a living. They feed the context and content of my work, and I do not expect to discover new aspects of these stories, but only to add to the dialogue of what is and to create a new way of looking at them. In making, I hope that I'm adding to our collective memory and reflecting on the world of today and of the past. So thank you all for attending. I see that there's questions in the chat, so I'm more than happy to answer them. And let me see. Thank you all.
So you had more comments than questions,
Yes.
but if anyone does have questions, you can either turn your microphone on and ask, or you can type it in the chat.
And I'm happy to go back to different slides if I should share again so you can see certain ones. But
so Kathy had a good question. If you could please talk a little bit about the material of Tyvek.
Oh, yes. So Tyvek is the construction material. It is one that you find on the outside of houses, believe it or not, or in the inside. It's great for, an installation, that kind of thing. But yes, it is also something that you can find at the post office. They have these really nice small Tyvek envelopes that are supposed to be waterproof. So it's a very strong material. It's both plastic and paper. The fibers you can see in the light go all sorts of ways, and it is very lightweight. So it's really manageable for these kind of very intricate, small cutouts that I'm doing. I have had less success painting on Tyvek, although I know of many Tyvek artists who do paint on Tyvek. And the issue is to get the right balance of pigment and medium, most likely using acrylics and or inks, to then have the Tyvek absorb the pigment, because it is waterproof. So that, I hope that doesn't give too much information or not enough. I mean, I can go on, but I buy my Tyvek in very large rolls. And then I just, start working in that way. Just kind of roll things up, and then I work just sort of inch by inch, and so I never really see what something looks like until I roll it all out and it's close to finish.
I have a question. I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. So my question is, if you're working on paper, see, I can understand the Tyvek is something that's non-destructible almost. It's a wonderful idea. However, for the environment, it's really, I think paper, I loved your collage on paper that you did in Japan. You did a lot of painting collage. The caves. I thought that was really nice. But on paper, right? That's paper.
Yes. Well, the beginning work, some of it's on paper, some of it's on canvas. When I was working in France, I went back and forth to whatever I had on hand, but I really started to work strictly on paper from my time in Japan. Yes.
Was your, when you did the caves, were you out there near the caves, your artist residency?
Well, yes. So I had an artist residency and we traveled over to where the caves of Lascaux are. So we were able to travel there, and you can't go into the actual caves. They are closed to the public. They have this amazing replica of the caves, though, that is quite profound. And then artifacts of the caves themselves that you can go and study. But the caves themselves actually are you know, on the brink of destruction because of the mold that people have brought in through breathing and that kind of thing. So they are completely closed now to the public.
Thank you.
Yes.
We have a question from Natasha. What inspires you to be an artist? And she adds that you are extremely talented.
Oh, well, thank you, Natasha. I don't think I can do anything else. So it's one of those things where if I could do something else, I probably would. That's not answering the inspiration part of it, but I think it's something just to put out there, is that when you find what you have to do, then you find ways to be inspired to keep on doing it. And so other than storytelling and natural elements, I am inspired by the many contemporary artists around me. I'm inspired by pretty much every interaction that I have. Everything goes into my artwork. So it is very much like being, I imagine, because I'm not, a journalist or a nonfiction person, where you're bringing things in constantly and you're taking these ideas. But it is something that I've just always had to do, and I couldn't do something else. So I hope that answers that question. I do see other ones too.
Avon, who happens to be one of our wonderful gallery workers and installers. So
thank you so much.
Definitely helped out with this process. But Avon wants to know, how long does it take you to complete one of the hand cut paper pieces?
It does depend on the size. The 20-foot scrolls can take anywhere, and it depends on how much I get to work on it. I work every day for at least an hour or 2 hours a day on the cut paper. And the way I fit it in, because as an artist, as many of you know or will get to know, you wear many, many hats. So the way I fit it in is I wake up around 5 in the morning and I work for an hour. It's always the first thing that I do before anything else. I also have coffee, but it's the first thing that I do. And so at the very least, I've gotten an hour in. So the long 20-foot ones can take anywhere between 3 to 5 months, depending on how intricate they are. The smaller 7-foot ones, but are also very intricate, probably 2.5 months for those.
And thank you for sharing that it is time consuming and you have to schedule it in, that you have to make that time to work, even with everything else going on in life. So thank you for sharing that.
My husband, who's a writer, as you know, he gave me the best advice, which was do what you love first. The laundry will always be there. I mean, hopefully the kids will always be there, but but do what you love first. And for me, that means I have to wake up at a terrible hour to do it, but that's what it means. And it makes it so every day is a good day.
That's beautiful. Kathy asks, do you do preliminary drawings and then transfer it to the Tyvek?
I do sketches, absolutely. I have a notebook and I will do small thumbnail sketches just to get an idea of the composition. I never go above, like my sketch will never be more than 4 inches by 6 inches, though, believe it or not. And then what I do for the Tyvek is I will lay it out and get the basic forms like, oh, I want the moon to be up here, and I want this kind of tree form to be over here. But then everything else is basically at the time I'm doing it, it's like improv. So I am constantly problem solving because I'm making my work with a knife. And accidents happen. So I'm constantly always going back to the mark I did before and saying, how do I change this mark so it looks different from these marks? And how do I give this more depth or more width? Or how do I sort of get this vision out here in this very small cellular form? We see the broader work, but really we make it on a cellular level. So it's important to address both. And mark making is like our alphabet as artists. That's, that's what we use. The more variety I can make with this one tool, the better off I'm going to be. So it's a constant, back and forth dialogue between the two. But yes, there's not a whole lot of, except for that small sketch that I do, and then sort of the basic form that I do there. Other ones that are a little more rigid, I have a basic idea, but for some reason I can just do that shape over and over and over again. So it's through practice, I suppose. So that's how they're made.
Natasha, I don't know if you had another question with your hand up or if the hand just never came down. Or if anyone else has a question, you can definitely type it in the chat or let us know.
Oh, I have a question again.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so during the lockdown, and if you had a retreat or artist residency, did you still go anyway? Even
No, I couldn't because we weren't allowed to travel into Europe during the time of that residency. So everything had to be virtual, which was interesting, but I still learned quite a bit because they were bringing other international artists together. So we would meet daily or weekly and show our work and be able to talk about it. So you still got the community of an artist residency. You didn't get the travel, but you still were able to get the community. So unfortunately, no, I do hope one day to go to Sofia, but no.
Well, thank you for telling. I wanted to say that this is so wonderful to be able to have this virtual. It's like much better than if we were in the gallery. It's like we'd get to talk to you so personally. It's so nice. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to make this situation as best as we possibly can. Although I do hope you all go into the gallery and see the work.
Well, I will. Thank you.
Yes, please do. Lydia has a question. I mean, you may have already kind of talked about this, but maybe there is something else to add about your creative process for making the artworks.
It depends on the series. The series I'm working on currently, I'm doing a lot of scientific research, which is not my normal process. So I'm looking at these different algae and their effect on the environment, and how we're dealing with them and their effect on us personally. And then I look at folklore related to this algae. And from there, I try to get certain symbols to draw out those symbols. So I use cellular symbols, but then I also look at the way this algae may be talked about in indigenous cultures or how it might be used. And so then that determines how my composition is going to look. And then I think about it relating to me. So, because again, I really am a big believer that if I can't relate to it on a personal level, then maybe neither can you. So I have to put in something that is personal for that form. So it kind of, that is somewhat of my process, and that I might start with a folk tale a story that may not be of my culture, where I'm from, but then I try to find folklore from the area I'm in, Missouri, the Ozarks, that will relate to that other folklore, because folklore is very similar everywhere. There's something very universal about how we talk about certain things and different, and especially natural things that occur. So I will look at that, and then I will research the history of it and see what has been done and draw out different elements from that to help inform my imagery, and then see what it is that I want to bring to the table. Does this register, resonate with me in some way? So that is there's a lot of research that goes into my process in the very beginning, because I have to stick with it. These are really long and arduous pieces, and I might be with a piece for a couple of months. So I have to keep my interest up. If it's a piece that doesn't keep sparking interest or keep talking to me or bringing new things, then I'm not going to stay with it. So I do that process to just keep on working with the image, and we become friends at the end.
Yeah, that was great. Anything else, everyone?
I get it. One more question. This is Charlotte, and the Tyvek thing is really nothing new. It's been around. I mean, I've been working with it over 5 or 6 years, and I teach art, so I do have the kids go to the post office and get samples of the Tyvek, and then use it for cutting out silhouettes. It's a design tool and then painting them as a stencil.
Nice.
So yes, so it's nothing new. I mean, a lot of artists use the Tyvek.
Oh yes. Angel and I were talking before about, I was geeking out over all these Tyvek artists, because, once you start using something, you see it kind of everywhere. And absolutely, it's really a wonderful material, and I highly recommend everybody getting involved in using it. Because if it works for you, then it works for you. And it's always great to find that material that you can spend a lot of time with. I'm always on the lookout for other papers that may do the same thing. And because again, Tyvek is very much of today. It's not something you would find in the 1900s, or this is very much, well, I guess 1990 or maybe in the 60s it started. I'm not quite sure, but it's very much of today. So I feel like I would like to work with paper that could have the same kind of resiliency as Tyvek. So if you have any suggestions, I'd be open to them.
Well, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to hear about your process and to see a lot of the other work that isn't in the gallery right now. And I really invite everyone to come and check us out. Again, we're on Central Campus of Broward College in Davie, and the show will be up through January 12th, with the exception of Thanksgiving weekend and winter break. But it really is an experience to see it in person, for sure. So thank you so much for sharing with us tonight and in the gallery as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.